You are walking down a busy street and you see someone collapse on the sidewalk. 20 people are around you. Surely one of them will help. You wait half a second to see what happens. So does everyone else. And in that half second, something ancient and invisible takes over your brain. The real answer to why nobody moves first is far stranger than simple cruelty or indifference. It happened in New York City in 1964. A young woman named Kitty Genovese was walking home late at night when she was attacked outside her apartment building. Newspapers reported that dozens of neighbors heard her cries and did nothing. The story spread fast. People were horrified. How could so many human beings listen to someone scream for their life and just stay in bed? The story, as it turned out, was wrong in many of its details. Fewer people witnessed the full attack than first reported, and at least one person did call for help. But the case still cracked something open. Two psychologists, John Darley and Bib Latane, couldn't stop thinking about it. They didn't want to know if people were monsters. They wanted to know something colder and more useful. They wanted to know what the presence of other people does to your brain in an emergency. So they built an experiment. Participants sat alone in a room, supposedly taking part in a discussion over an intercom. Partway through, one voice on the intercom started having what sounded like a seizure. The participant believed they were one of several people listening in. Some believed they were the only listener. Some believed there were one or two others. Some believed there were as many as 5 others. Here's where it gets strange. The participants who believed they were the only witness helped almost every single time and fast. The ones who believed 4 other people were also listening helped less often and much more slowly. Some never helped at all. The seizure sounded identical in every version. The only thing that changed was the number of people the participant believed were also listening. More potential helpers in the room. Less actual help. Darley and Latane called it diffusion of responsibility. Picture responsibility as a single bucket of water. When you're the only witness, that whole bucket sits in your hands. There's no one else to pass it to. But add 4 more people to the room, and the same bucket gets split 5 ways. Each person ends up holding less responsibility, and the brain treats a smaller portion as a smaller obligation to act. Nobody decided to do less. The math just happened automatically, underneath conscious thought. There's a second mechanism running alongside it, and it's just as old. Psychologists call it social referencing, but you've felt it your entire life without a name for it. When something is ambiguous, you check other people's faces before you decide how to feel. You do this in a meeting when a strange noise interrupts the speaker. You do this on an airplane when the engine makes an odd sound. Everyone glances around. If everyone else looks calm, you decide it must be fine. In an emergency, this becomes a trap. If a person collapses and 20 bystanders are all individually unsure whether it's a real crisis or just someone resting, they look at each other for the answer. And what do they see? 20 other people who also look calm, because they're also waiting for someone else's face to tell them what to feel. Nobody panics, so nobody acts, so the whole group reads as calm even when every single person inside it is quietly unsure. Researchers call this pluralistic ignorance. A group can be collectively wrong about its own emotional state, while each person assumes everyone else has it figured out. Now stretch this back further than 1964. Stretch it back about 2 million years to small bands of early humans moving together across open grassland. In a group that size, ambiguity was constant and dangerous. Was that rustle in the grass a predator or just the wind? You didn't have time to analyze it alone. You watched the people around you. If they froze, you froze. If they ran, you ran. Reading the group's reaction faster than you could reason through the threat yourself kept you alive long enough to reproduce. This is the part neuroscience adds that 1964 couldn't yet explain. Researchers studying mirror neurons, including work associated with Giacomo Rizzolatti, found that certain neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you simply watch someone else perform it. Your brain doesn't cleanly separate "this is happening to me" from "this is happening to someone I'm watching." Watching calm faces doesn't just inform you that the situation is probably fine. It makes a part of your nervous system feel calm too, almost as if you tried it on. In a crowd of bystanders, that effect compounds. Calm spreads through a group of strangers the way a yawn spreads through a room quietly, without anyone agreeing to it. So by the time you reach a modern sidewalk and someone collapses in front of 20 strangers, you are not making a cold, free decision about whether to help. You are running two ancient subroutines at the same time. One is splitting responsibility evenly among everyone present, so your individual share feels smaller. The other is scanning the faces around you for proof that something is actually wrong, and finding only people who are doing the exact same scan back at you. Multiply that by 20 people simultaneously running the same two subroutines, and you get a frozen crowd that, individually, every member would swear felt uneasy the entire time. Here's the twist almost nobody expects. The bystander effect isn't really about cruelty, and it isn't really about crowds making people careless. In multiple follow-up studies, when researchers made the emergency unmistakably real, with no ambiguity left to interpret, the size of the crowd mattered far less. People still helped. What the bystander effect actually measures is uncertainty, amplified by numbers, not the absence of caring. The 20 people on that sidewalk likely cared exactly as much as the one person who would have helped instantly if they'd been alone. They just couldn't get a clear enough signal, fast enough, through the noise of everyone else's hesitation. This explains something that feels almost backwards once you notice it. Ask any single bystander afterward, privately away from the group, and most will say they felt something was wrong. They noticed. They cared. They just looked around first, the way humans have looked around for 2 million years, and the group handed them back a reading of fine that wasn't true for anyone inside it. Knowing the mechanism turns out to be the single most reliable way to break it. Darley and Latane found, and later researchers confirmed, that simply teaching people about the bystander effect measurably increases the odds they'll act the next time they witness an emergency. Once you know the freeze is diffusion of responsibility plus a faulty social mirror, and not a personal failure of character, you stop waiting for the feeling of certainty to arrive on its own. You can manufacture it. This is also why the most effective advice for surviving an emergency as the victim sounds almost too simple. Point at one specific person. Say their name if you know it, or describe what they're wearing if you don't. You, in the red jacket, call an ambulance. The instant responsibility has a single named target. The bucket stops splitting. Diffusion has nothing left to diffuse across. That one person now holds the entire weight alone, exactly the way the lone intercom listener did in 1964. And the data says they almost always act. Think about the last time you scrolled past someone's distressing post online and assumed someone else, somewhere in that sea of thousands of viewers, would already be messaging them or reporting it. Or the last time you were in a group chat and a friend mentioned something dark, and you told yourself surely one of the other people in the chat would check in on them. That's the same bucket, just rebuilt out of pixels instead of pavement. The group got bigger. The certainty got thinner. The responsibility, mathematically, got smaller in every single mind holding a piece of it, including yours. There's another layer to this that researchers didn't fully appreciate until decades after the original intercom experiments. It's called evaluation apprehension, and it has nothing to do with the victim at all. It's about you and what the crowd might think of you if you act and you're wrong. Imagine running towards someone slumped on a bench, only to discover they are simply asleep. Now everyone is staring at you. You misread the situation in public. That fear, the fear of looking foolish or overreacting in front of strangers, sits quietly underneath the diffusion of responsibility and the faulty social mirror, adding a third layer of hesitation on top of the other two. Alone, there's no audience to embarrass yourself in front of. In a crowd, every bystander is also a potential judge, and your brain knows it. This is part of why training changes the equation so completely. Soldiers, nurses, lifeguards, and emergency responders are drilled to act under exactly the conditions that paralyze untrained civilians. Ambiguous signals, multiple bystanders, no clear authority. The drilling doesn't make them braver in some abstract sense. It removes the ambiguity before the moment ever arrives. They've already decided in advance what a real emergency looks like and what their job is the instant they see it. There's no scanning the crowd for permission, because the decision was made days or years earlier, in a classroom or a training yard, long before any actual stranger collapsed in front of them. The lesson generalizes far beyond professional training. Even mentally rehearsing, just once, what you would do if someone needed help nearby measurably shortens the freeze when the real moment comes. Consider, too, what this means about cities versus small towns, a pattern researchers have documented again and again. People in small towns help strangers faster and more often than people in big cities, and for a long time this got chalked up to character, as if rural living simply produced kinder, more decent humans. The data tells a less flattering and more interesting story. Small towns produce less ambiguity. You're more likely to recognize the person in distress, more likely to be recognized yourself, and far less likely to be one face lost in a crowd of total strangers where responsibility can dissolve without consequence. Put a small-town resident on a packed subway platform in an unfamiliar city, and the same diffusion takes hold of them instantly. The kindness was never the variable. The size and anonymity of the crowd always was. Stretch this idea forward instead of backward, and it starts to explain a strange feature of modern life that has nothing to do with sidewalks at all. Bureaucracies, corporations, and governments diffuse responsibility on purpose, often without anyone consciously designing it that way. A decision gets passed through a dozen departments, a dozen signatures, a dozen people each holding one small piece of the bucket until a clearly bad outcome occurs, and somehow no single person feels they were the one responsible for stopping it. Hannah Arendt, writing about bureaucratic violence in the 20th century, noticed something close to this same mechanism operating at a civilizational scale, where systems of shared responsibility allowed individuals to feel a strange, hollow innocence, even while participating in something enormous and wrong. The intercom experiment in a psychology lab and the committee meeting in a skyscraper are running on the same ancient hardware. Just the size of the room changed. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all this. The bystander effect was never really a flaw unique to bad people in bad moments. It's a setting, baked into a brain built for small bands on open grassland, now running inside cities and group chats and institutions with millions of nodes instead of 20. The hardware hasn't updated. Only the size of the rooms has. So the next time you're standing in a crowd and something feels wrong, and everyone's face looks calm, remember that those faces are not evidence. They're mirrors, all reflecting the same uncertainty back at each other, with nobody volunteering to be the one who breaks the silence first. The real answer was never that people stopped caring in a crowd. It's that caring, without a name and a face attached to it, has nowhere to land.